The bridge was already dying. Fire devoured the ropes. Smoke swallowed the sky. Below, an endless canyon waited like the mouth of a hungry god. Everyone on the mountainside screamed for the Omega Girl to turn back. But Elara Voss wasn't looking at the flames. She was looking at the creature trapped on the other side. A massive black wolf. Bleeding. Broken.
Dying.
And in its golden eyes,
Fear.
real fear. Not the fear of death. The fear of being abandoned. The next rope snapped. The bridge lurched violently. The wolf growled weakly. The crowd gasped. And then the impossible happened. The smallest girl in the village stepped onto the burning bridge. Because she didn't know the beast belonged to the most feared king in the world. She didn't know her choice would awaken an ancient destiny. She didn't know it would start a war. And she certainly didn't know that the monster king waiting beyond the mountains would soon become obsessed with the girl who saved what he loved most. Winter had teeth in the northern mountains. The wind howled through the cliffs like starving spirits searching for a grave. Snow drifted across the village of Hollow Ridge, covering rooftops in white silence, while smoke rose from chimneys into the gray afternoon sky. It should have been an ordinary day. Instead, disaster arrived with fire. The first scream echoed from the eastern cliffs. Then another. Then dozens. Villagers rushed from their homes as mountain raiders descended from the high ridges above the canyon. Torches flew through the air. Flames spread across wooden structures. Panic exploded through the settlement. Children cried. Men grabbed hunting spears. Women pulled families toward safety. And amid the chaos stood Elara Voss.
Small. Quiet.
Forgettable. At least that was what everyone believed. Her silver cloak whipped violently around her legs as she stared toward the canyon bridge connecting both sides of the mountain pass. Something moved beyond the flames. A shape. Huge.
Dark. Alive.
Then she saw it. The wolf. Its black fur was stained crimson. One hind leg bent unnaturally beneath its body. Smoke curled around its massive frame. Golden eyes stared through the chaos. Not angry. Not savage. Afraid. The realization struck Elara harder than the winter wind. The beast was trapped. The bridge burned from both ends. Escape was impossible. Death was coming. The villagers noticed it too. But nobody moved. Because everyone understood the truth. Crossing meant suicide. The old bridge groaned as another support rope snapped. The entire structure swayed over the abyss. The canyon below vanished into darkness, so deep that sunlight never touched its bottom. "Leave it," someone shouted. "It won't survive." Another rope broke. Flames raced across the wooden planks. The wolf tried standing. Collapsed. Tried again.
Failed.
Its exhausted growl barely reached the village. Elara felt something twist inside her chest.
Pain.
Loneliness. Desperation. For one impossible moment, she recognized those feelings, because she had lived with them her entire life. Being unwanted, being ignored, being left behind. The wolf looked exactly how she had always felt. And suddenly, she couldn't look away. No. The whisper escaped her lips. The villagers turned. Confusion crossed their faces. Then horror, because Elara was already moving, running toward the bridge. Elara. She ignored them. Snow crunched beneath her boots. The heat intensified with every step. Smoke burned her lungs. The bridge creaked violently.
Still she ran.
Someone grabbed her arm. An elderly villager. His face pale with fear. "You'll die." Elara looked back only once. Her silver eyes shone through the smoke. Maybe. Then she pulled free and stepped onto the burning bridge. The world erupted with screams behind her. The wooden planks trembled beneath her weight. Heat licked her skin. The smell of burning rope filled the air. Every step felt like a challenge against death itself. Halfway across, another support snapped. The bridge dropped several feet. Elara nearly fell. A gasp rose from the crowd. She grabbed a rope, steadied herself, kept moving, because the wolf was still watching her, waiting, believing. By the time she reached the other side, tears streamed from the beast's eyes. Or perhaps it was melted snow. Elara couldn't tell. The creature was enormous, far larger than any wolf should be. Its golden gaze locked onto hers. For a second, the world became strangely quiet. No wind, no fire, no screams. Just two wounded souls staring at each other. Then the bridge cracked again. Reality returned. "We have to go." Her voice trembled. The wolf tried standing. Collapsed immediately. The injury was too severe. Panic surged through her chest. The bridge wouldn't last. There wasn't enough time. Unless Elara dropped beside the creature, wrapped its massive foreleg over her shoulders, and started dragging. Pain exploded through her muscles. The wolf weighed more than 3 grown men, yet somehow it helped. Not with strength, with trust. The beast allowed her to guide it, step by step, inch by inch. The bridge burned beneath them. Smoke thickened. The rope screamed. Every movement felt impossible. Then disaster struck. A section of plank shattered beneath the wolf. Its front legs plunged through the bridge. The crowd cried out. Elara dropped to her knees, grabbed the creature's neck, pulled with everything she possessed. Her shoulders burned. Her lungs ached. Her vision blurred. "Please." The prayer escaped without thought. "Please don't let go." The wolf looked directly into her eyes, and somehow found the strength to climb. Together they staggered forward. 10 steps. 5 steps. 3. The village side approached. Hope flickered. Then the final support rope snapped. The bridge began collapsing. People screamed. The entire structure tilted toward the abyss. Elara threw herself forward. The wolf lunged. They crashed onto solid ground. 1 heartbeat later, the bridge vanished.
Wood.
Flames. Ropes. Everything disappeared into darkness. Silence followed. Complete silence. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then realization spread through the crowd. The Omega Girl had survived. And she had saved the impossible. The giant black wolf lifted its head slowly, golden eyes fixed on Elara. Then the beast lowered itself before her, a gesture that looked strangely like respect. Far beyond the mountains, inside the frozen walls of Ashenfang Palace, a messenger dropped to one knee before the throne. King Kaelen Draven listened in silence. The news struck like lightning. Fenrir was alive, his oldest companion, his last connection to a life that no longer existed.
Alive.
For the first time in years, the king felt something other than grief.
Hope.
The messenger swallowed nervously. "There is one more thing, Your Majesty." Kaelen's cold eyes narrowed. "What?" The messenger lowered his gaze. "The wolf refuses to leave the Omega Girl who saved him." Silence filled the throne room. Dangerous silence. Then the Alpha King stood.
Slowly.
Deliberately. And every noble present felt fear crawl through their veins. "Bring her to me." The order echoed through the hall. Thousands of miles away, royal soldiers rode toward Hollow Ridge carrying the king's seal. And as Elara watched armored riders emerge from the snowstorm the following morning, a terrible feeling settled inside her chest. Because everyone in Ashenfang knew one truth. When the Alpha King summoned someone, their life never remained the same. The journey to Ashenfang Palace lasted 7 days. 7 days of snow-covered roads. 7 days of silence. 7 days of wondering whether she was riding toward a reward or an execution. Elara sat inside the royal carriage wrapped in a thick fur cloak provided by the king's soldiers. Outside, endless forests drifted past beneath a blanket of winter frost. The kingdom looked beautiful and terrifying. Every village they passed seemed to freeze when the royal banners appeared. People lowered their heads. Shopkeepers stopped talking. Children ran indoors. Nobody smiled. Nobody celebrated. Nobody even whispered the king's name, because fear traveled faster than respect. And King Kaelen Draven inspired plenty of fear. By the time the black towers of Ashenfang Palace appeared on the horizon, Elara's stomach felt twisted into knots. The fortress rose from the frozen landscape like a mountain carved from darkness itself. Massive stone walls surrounded the capital. Thousands of banners snapped violently in the wind. Watchtowers pierced the gray sky. The entire palace looked less like a home, and more like a prison built for giants. The carriage rolled through enormous iron gates. The sound echoed across the courtyard. Soldiers stood motionless. Servants avoided eye contact. Even the air felt heavy, as if the castle itself carried secrets too dark to speak aloud. Elara stepped from the carriage. Snow crunched beneath her boots. Cold wind brushed against her face. And immediately she felt it. Hundreds of eyes watching, judging, measuring. And Omega, inside the Alpha King's palace. Whispers spread through nearby servants. Confusion, curiosity, disapproval. Nobody understood why she had been summoned. Truthfully, neither did she. A royal captain approached. His expression remained carefully neutral. The king will receive you after the evening gathering. Elara nodded. Her voice almost disappeared beneath the wind. Thank you. The captain looked surprised. Most people addressed royal officers with fear. She spoke with simple kindness. That alone made her different. Until then, he continued, you will remain under palace protection. Protection. The words sounded suspiciously similar to surveillance. Before Elara could respond, a sudden commotion erupted across the courtyard. Shouting, running footsteps, alarmed voices. The captain spun around. What is happening? Nobody answered, because something enormous had already appeared. A massive black shape burst through the palace entrance. Guards jumped aside. Servants scattered. Nobles gasped. And Elara's heart nearly stopped. Fenrir. The giant wolf moved with terrifying speed despite his recent injuries. Handlers chased after him. Desperate. Powerless. The beast ignored every command. Ignored every order. Ignored everyone. Except her. The courtyard fell silent. Hundreds of people watched as the legendary great wolf crossed the snow-covered stones. Straight toward the Omega girl. Elara stood frozen. Disbelief filling her chest. Fenrir. The wolf reached her. Stopped. Golden eyes lifted toward hers. For one endless second, nobody moved. Then the impossible happened. The great wolf lowered his head and knelt. Before her, a collective gasp swept through the courtyard. Shock exploded across every face, because everyone knew what that gesture meant. Submission, trust, respect. The king's wolf had never bowed to anyone. Not even generals. Not even nobles. Not even kings from allied nations. Yet here he was, kneeling before a forgotten Omega from a mountain village. Whispers erupted immediately. What is she? How did she do that? Impossible. Elara barely heard them. Her hands trembled as she touched Fenrir's fur. The wolf closed his eyes. Content. Safe. Home. For reasons she couldn't understand, her own heart felt strangely calm, as though something ancient had awakened. Watching. Waiting. Remembering. Above the courtyard, hidden behind a balcony window, another pair of eyes observed everything. Cold eyes. Dangerous eyes. King Kaelen Draven. The ruler stood motionless. Black clothing. Broad shoulders. Scarred hands resting behind his back. The sight below unsettled him. Fenrir trusted nobody. After years of war, betrayal, and bloodshed, the wolf had become almost as guarded as his master. Yet now, the beast looked peaceful. Kaelen hadn't seen that expression in years. His gaze shifted toward the girl. She appeared smaller than he expected, fragile, almost insignificant. And yet Fenrir looked at her the way lost travelers looked at sunlight. Interesting. Very interesting. That evening, Ashenfang's grand hall glittered beneath thousands of candles. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings. Nobles filled endless rows of tables. Music drifted softly through the air. Everything appeared elegant, beautiful, civilized. But Elara quickly realized appearances lied. Predators sat beneath every crown. Every smile hid a weapon. Every compliment concealed calculation. Political warfare disguised itself as conversation. And she had no armor, only honesty, which made her vulnerable. As Elara sat quietly among the guests, countless nobles studied her. Some with curiosity, others with contempt. One woman in particular watched with undisguised hostility. Lady Seraphine Valcrest. Beautiful, powerful, dangerous. The future queen, according to half the kingdom. Her emerald eyes followed every movement Elara made, especially whenever the king looked in her direction. And, unfortunately, that happened more often than anyone noticed, including Kaelen himself. The Alpha King sat upon an elevated throne at the far end of the hall.
Silent.
Commanding. Untouchable. Yet several times throughout the evening, his attention drifted back toward the Omega girl. Not because she demanded attention, because she didn't. Everyone else wanted something from him.
Power.
Status. Influence.
Fear.
Elara wanted nothing. That alone made her impossible to ignore. Then everything changed. A servant approached Fenrir carrying a silver bowl of meat. Normal. Ordinary. Forgettable. Except Elara suddenly noticed something strange. The smell. A bitter scent hidden beneath roasted spices.
Wrong.
Dangerous. The realization struck instantly. Her body moved before her mind could catch up. Wait. The cry echoed through the hall. Every conversation stopped. Every face turned. Fenrir lowered his head toward the bowl. Elara lunged forward. The silver dish crashed onto the floor. Meat scattered across the marble. Silence exploded across the room. Then outrage followed. What are you doing? Have you lost your mind? The servant stumbled backward. Terrified, Kaelen rose slowly from his throne. The temperature inside the hall seemed to drop. Explain. One word. Nothing more. Yet the entire room froze. Elara's pulse hammered. She swallowed.
Hard.
It was poisoned. Murmurs erupted instantly. The servant's face turned white. Kaelen's eyes narrowed. A royal healer rushed forward. Examined the meat. Seconds later, his expression darkened. Nightshade. Shock rippled through the crowd. Lethal poison. Enough to kill even a creature as powerful as Fenrir. The wolf would have died within hours. Silence returned. Heavy. Oppressive. The king looked toward Elara. Something changed in his expression. Not warmth. Not yet. Something rarer.
Trust.
Because she had just saved the one life he valued above almost everything else. Again. Across the room, Seraphine's fingers tightened around her wine glass. The crystal nearly cracked. For the first time, jealousy appeared.
Dark. Ugly. Growing.
And she hated it. Later that night, after the feast ended, Elara stood alone beneath moonlit palace gardens. Snow shimmered beneath silver light. The world felt strangely peaceful, until footsteps approached. Heavy, controlled, powerful. She turned, and found herself face to face with the Alpha King. Up close, he seemed even more intimidating.
Taller.
Broader. Dangerous in ways words couldn't describe. Yet beneath all that strength, she saw something unexpected. Exhaustion. Ancient exhaustion. Like a man who had been fighting the world for too long. Kaelen studied her quietly. You saved him twice. His deep voice carried through the cold night air. Elara glanced toward Fenrir sleeping nearby. He deserved saving. The king's gaze sharpened. Most people save creatures because they expect something in return. She shook her head.
No.
Why? The question surprised even him. For a moment, she simply looked at the sleeping wolf. Then answered softly. Because nobody should be abandoned when they're afraid. The words struck Kaelen harder than any weapon. Because, suddenly, he wasn't thinking about Fenrir. He was remembering himself. Years ago. Standing alone beside a grave. Watching everyone leave. Abandoned. Broken. The silence stretched. Dangerous. Intimate. For the first time in years. Someone had touched a wound nobody could see. Neither noticed Lady Seraphine watching from a distant balcony. Her expression had become terrifying, because she finally understood something. The Omega wasn't merely interesting. She was becoming important. And important things threatened plans. Plans required removal. As Elara turned to leave, moonlight slipped across her wrist. A royal historian walking through the gardens froze instantly. His eyes widened. Horror. Recognition. Disbelief. visible all at once, because hidden beneath her sleeve, he had seen a silver mark, a symbol buried in forbidden records, a symbol belonging to a bloodline believed extinct for centuries, the bloodline of the Moon Queen. And as the old historian stared at Elara disappearing into the darkness, he realized the kingdom's future had just become infinitely more dangerous. Winter tightened its grip around Ashenfang. The palace stood beneath a sky the color of iron, its black towers disappearing into drifting snow while cold winds prowled across the battlements like restless ghosts. But inside the royal court, a different storm was gathering, one made of whispers,
rumors, fear.
And the name at the center of it all was no longer King Kaelen Draven. It was Elara Voss, the Omega Girl who had arrived as a nobody. The Omega Girl the Great Wolf obeyed. The Omega Girl the King had begun watching. And in Ashenfang, attention was often more dangerous than hatred. The royal historian barely slept. 3 nights passed after seeing the strange silver mark on Elara's wrist. 3 nights spent buried beneath ancient scrolls and forbidden records. Candles burned down to wax. Dust filled the air. Old pages cracked beneath trembling fingers. And finally, he found it. The symbol. His blood ran cold. Because it was real. Not similar. Not connected. The exact symbol. The crest of the Moon Queen. A royal bloodline erased from history over 500 years ago. A bloodline supposedly destroyed forever. The old man stared at the parchment. His hands shook. Because if Elara carried that mark, everything the kingdom believed about its history was a lie. And some lies had the power to start wars. Far away in the training courtyard, steel clashed against steel. The sound echoed across the frozen grounds. Kaelen Draven fought as though he were trying to kill something. Perhaps he was. Not an enemy. Not an assassin. His own thoughts. The Alpha King's sword cut through the air with terrifying force. 1 strike.
2. 3.
The wooden practice dummy shattered completely. Nearby soldiers exchanged nervous glances. Nobody dared interrupt him, because everyone recognized the signs. The king was troubled, and a troubled king was dangerous. Sweat glistened across Kaelen's neck despite the cold. His breathing remained steady, controlled, but his mind was anything but. He kept seeing silver eyes, hearing a soft voice, because nobody should be abandoned when they're afraid. The words haunted him, simple, innocent, yet they reached places inside him no one had touched in years. Places he had buried beside a grave that still visited him every night, a grave he never escaped. His jaw tightened. The memory returned. His mate, her laughter, her smile, the child they never met.
Gone.
All gone, because he had failed. And failure was something Kaelen never forgave. Not in others. Certainly not in himself. The sound of approaching footsteps interrupted his thoughts. A royal guard bowed. My king. Kaelen lowered his sword. What is it? The historian requests an audience. Something in the soldier's voice sounded uneasy. Kaelen noticed immediately. What happened? The guard hesitated, then spoke. He says it concerns the Omega. Silence. Dangerous silence. Then Kaelen sheathed his sword and followed. Meanwhile, Elara stood alone inside the palace library. Massive windows overlooked snow-covered mountains. Thousands of books surrounded her. Ancient histories, forgotten legends, lost kingdoms, stories no one read anymore. Normally the library felt peaceful. Today it felt strange, because every time she touched certain books, something happened. Small things. Impossible things. Books slipped from shelves by themselves. Candles flickered violently. Ancient symbols glowed briefly before fading again. The first time it happened, she thought she imagined it. Now she wasn't so sure. A cold sensation traveled through her fingertips. The book she held suddenly vibrated. Light appeared beneath the cover.
Silver. Soft. Alive.
Elara gasped. The book fell open. Pages flipped rapidly.
Faster. Faster. Faster.
Until they stopped on a single illustration. A woman wearing a silver crown, surrounded by wolves. Moonlight radiating from her skin. The Moon Queen. Elara stared. Something deep inside her chest twisted painfully. Recognition. Impossible recognition. As though she knew this woman. As though she remembered her. The feeling vanished as quickly as it came, leaving confusion behind. "What are you?" The whisper escaped before she realized it. But she wasn't speaking to the picture. She was speaking to herself. That evening, the royal court gathered for a political assembly. The atmosphere felt heavier than usual. War loomed beyond the borders. Neighboring kingdoms grew aggressive. Trade routes were collapsing. And Ashenfang's nobles demanded certainty. One demand echoed louder than all others. Marriage. The kingdom wanted an heir. The kingdom wanted stability. The kingdom wanted a queen. And, unfortunately, they already had a candidate. Lady Seraphine Valcrest. She stood beside the throne wearing emerald silk and a smile sharp enough to cut flesh. Beautiful. Elegant.
Deadly.
The perfect predator. One noble stepped forward. "My king, Ashenfang requires security." Another nodded. "The people need reassurance." A royal marriage would strengthen the kingdom. Murmurs of agreement filled the hall. Kaelen remained motionless, expressionless. The silence stretched. Everyone waited. Everyone watched, especially Seraphine, because she believed victory was finally approaching. Then Kaelen spoke.
"No."
The entire room froze. Seraphine's smile cracked. Only slightly, but enough. The king's voice remained cold. "I will not choose a wife because frightened politicians demand it." The atmosphere instantly became dangerous. Tension crackled through the chamber. And standing among the gathered court, Elara suddenly understood something terrifying. Kaelen was alone. Completely alone. Not one person here cared about what he wanted. Only what they could gain from him. Power. Influence.
Control.
The realization hurt far more than it should have.
And she didn't understand why.
Days passed. Then weeks. The kingdom grew more unstable. But something else changed too. Kaelen and Elara began spending time together. Not intentionally. Not at first. Yet somehow they kept finding themselves in the same places. The library. The gardens. The wolf kennels. The northern cliffs overlooking the sea. Their conversations remained brief. Simple. Yet neither wanted them to end. Elara never treated him like a king. She treated him like a person. Kaelen had forgotten how rare that felt. One evening they stood beneath moonlit trees while Fenrir rested nearby. Snow drifted gently through the darkness. The world felt quiet. Almost peaceful. Dangerously peaceful. Kaelen watched her from the corner of his eye. "You aren't afraid of me." It wasn't a question. Elara smiled faintly. "Should I be? Most people are. Most people don't know you." The answer hit harder than expected. Because the terrifying truth was, he wanted her to know him. And that realization frightened him more than any battlefield ever had. High above them, hidden on a balcony, Seraphine watched everything. Every glance. Every silence. Every moment. Hatred burned hotter inside her with each passing day. The Omega had become a problem. And problems required solutions. Slowly, carefully, Seraphine began laying traps. Whispers spread throughout the kingdom. Rumors multiplied. The Omega was using magic. The Omega had enchanted the king. The Omega was manipulating Fenrir. The Omega was dangerous. The lies traveled quickly. Fear always traveled quickly. And fear was the easiest weapon to control. Then came the night everything changed. The royal council gathered unexpectedly. Emergency session. Mandatory attendance. The atmosphere felt wrong from the moment Elara entered.
Cold.
Hostile. Predatory. Nobody met her eyes. Nobody smiled. At the center of the room stood a sealed wooden chest. Kaelen sat upon his throne. His expression unreadable. A royal investigator stepped forward. "My king." The man's voice echoed through the hall. "We have discovered evidence." Elara felt dread immediately. What evidence? The investigator opened the chest. Dozens of letters spilled across the table. Military maps. Secret communications. Encoded messages. Every single document carried the same signature. Elara Voss. The room erupted. Accusations exploded from every direction. Traitor.
Spy.
Conspirator. Enemy agent. Elara stared in disbelief. Her hands shook. I never wrote those. Nobody listened. Nobody cared. Because the evidence looked perfect. Too perfect. Kaelen's gaze locked onto hers.
Searching. Questioning.
Trying desperately to find the truth. And for the first time since arriving in Ashenfang, Elara saw uncertainty in his eyes. The sight shattered something inside her, because she suddenly realized one terrifying possibility. He wasn't sure. He wanted to believe her, but he wasn't sure. And uncertainty was where destruction began. Then came the final blow. A guard rushed into the chamber, breathless,
Pale.
terrified. My king. The room fell silent. The soldier swallowed hard. More evidence has been found. Kaelen stood. What evidence? The guard looked toward Elara, fear visible in his face. Then he delivered the words that changed everything. Secret documents were discovered inside the Omega's chambers. The court exploded into chaos. And as nobles shouted for arrests, as accusations filled the hall, as Seraphine hid her satisfaction behind a mask of concern, Elara felt her world beginning to collapse. Outside her bedroom door, armored footsteps echoed through the corridor. Closer, 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 until dozens of royal guards surrounded her chambers at midnight. Steel glinted beneath torchlight. Orders were given. Weapons were drawn. And standing alone in the center of the darkness, Elara realized someone had just declared war on her life. Midnight had swallowed Ashenfang. Snow drifted beyond the palace windows like pale ghosts dancing through darkness. Torches flickered along stone corridors. Their golden light stretched across the walls like trembling fingers. And somewhere inside the castle, a heart was breaking. Elara stood motionless in the center of her chambers. The sound of armored boots echoed outside her door. Closer, 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 until they stopped. Silence followed. The terrible kind. The kind that arrived just before disaster. Then,
boom.
The chamber doors burst open. Royal guards flooded inside. Steel armor gleamed beneath torchlight. Swords remained sheathed. But everyone understood the message. This wasn't protection. It was arrest. Elara's pulse hammered painfully against her ribs. For a moment, she couldn't breathe.
Couldn't think.
Couldn't understand how everything had collapsed so quickly. Only yesterday she had walked through the palace gardens beside Fenrir. Only yesterday she had believed she was finally beginning to belong somewhere. Now dozens of soldiers looked at her as if she were a criminal, a threat, a traitor. The captain stepped forward. His expression carried genuine regret. My lady. The title sounded strange now. Almost cruel. The king has ordered an investigation. Investigation. Not imprisonment. Not yet. But the difference felt meaningless. Because everyone already believed she was guilty. The whispers had spread too far. The lies had taken root. And lies were dangerous because they grew faster than truth. Elara lowered her gaze. What happens now? The captain hesitated, then answered quietly. You come with us. The throne room felt colder than winter itself. Hundreds of candles burned, yet none offered warmth. Nobles lined both sides of the chamber, watching, waiting, hungry, predators waiting for blood. At the far end of the room sat Kaelen Draven, the Alpha King, the man she trusted most, the man whose opinions suddenly mattered more than it should. Tonight, he looked different. Not cold, not angry, destroyed. His expression remained controlled, but Elara could see the exhaustion beneath it, the conflict, the doubt,
the pain.
And somehow, that hurt even more, because she knew he wanted to believe her. Yet belief was becoming harder with every new piece of false evidence. A royal investigator approached the throne. Another collection of documents rested in his hands. My king. His voice echoed throughout the hall. Our search of the Omega's chambers uncovered hidden correspondence with enemy kingdoms. Murmurs exploded immediately. Traitor.
Spy. Witch.
Manipulator. The accusations came from every direction. Elara felt sick. She had never seen those documents before, never touched them, never written them. Yet nobody cared, because proof mattered less than appearance. And the appearance looked devastating. Kaelen's jaw tightened. His scarred fingers curled around the throne's armrest. He wanted to reject everything. Every document. Every accusation. Every lie. But kings could not rule through feelings. Kings ruled through evidence. And the evidence kept growing. His voice emerged low and dangerous. "Leave us." Confusion spread through the hall. The nobles protested immediately. "My king, leave." The single word crashed through the chamber. Silence followed. Nobody argued twice. One by one they departed, until only Elara and Kaelen remained. The massive throne room suddenly felt enormous. Empty. Lonely. A battlefield without soldiers. For a long moment neither spoke. Then Kaelen stood. Slowly. His dark gaze never leaving hers. I searched for another explanation. The confession sounded painful.
Raw.
I still am. Alara's chest tightened. Then why do you look at me like that? The question escaped before she could stop it. Kaelen froze. Because he knew exactly what she meant. He looked at her as though she were slipping away. As though something precious was breaking in his hands. And he didn't know how to stop it. "I don't know what's true anymore." The words emerged quietly, honestly, brutally. Elara flinched, not physically, emotionally, because that answer hurt more than an accusation. Trust wasn't dying. Trust was already dead. Silence filled the room. Heavy, unbearable. Kaelen stepped closer. For a brief moment, she thought he might touch her, comfort her, believe her. Instead, he stopped. A single step away. Close enough to feel her warmth. Far enough to remain a king. And not a man. The distance shattered both of them. High above the throne room, Lady Seraphine smiled. The trap was working perfectly. Every forged document. Every bribed witness. Every planted lie. Years of political manipulation had taught her a simple truth. People believed what they feared. And Ashenfang feared powerful women. Especially powerful Omegas. Elara never stood a chance. Soon the throne would belong entirely to Seraphine. And the king would have nobody left except her. Exactly as planned. The next morning brought disaster. Crowds gathered outside palace gates. Protests spread throughout the capital. Nobles demanded punishment. Military commanders demanded action. Political allies threatened rebellion. The kingdom had become a powder keg. And Elara stood at the center of the explosion. Inside the war council chamber, arguments raged for hours. Voices rose. Threats followed. The atmosphere felt seconds away from violence. If she remains here, civil war begins. The people demand justice. The throne appears compromised. Every sentence tightened the noose. Kaelen listened in silence. His face unreadable. Yet inside, he was drowning. Because every possible choice ended in loss. Defend Elara? The kingdom fractured. Condemn Elara? His soul fractured. For the first time in years, the Alpha King felt completely powerless. Then came the final demand. Exile. Not execution. Not imprisonment. Exile. Remove her from Ashenfang. Protect political stability. Avoid civil war. The room fell silent. Everyone waited. Waiting for the king. Waiting for the verdict. Waiting for the moment that would change everything. Kaelen closed his eyes. Just once. One heartbeat. One moment. One impossible wish. Then he opened them. And made the choice that would haunt him forever. Snow fell heavily when Elara was escorted toward the northern gates. The entire city seemed wrapped in gray sorrow. Fenrir fought against his handlers. Growling. Snarling. Desperate. The wolf understood something terrible was happening. Perhaps better than the humans did. Elara paused beside him. Her trembling fingers brushed through black fur. The wolf pressed his head against her shoulder, refusing to let go. Tears burned behind her eyes. Goodbye. The word nearly broke her. Fenrir released a wounded howl. The sound echoed across the city, across the walls, across the kingdom, a sound filled with grief, and loss, and helplessness. The crowd fell silent. Even soldiers lowered their eyes, because everyone could hear the pain. Then footsteps approached. Heavy, familiar. Kaelen, the Alpha King, stopped before her. Snow collected across his dark coat. Neither spoke. Neither knew how. There were too many things trapped between them. Too many wounds. Too many unfinished truths. Finally, Elara looked up, silver eyes shining with heartbreak. Did you ever believe me? The question struck like a blade. Kaelen couldn't answer. Not because he thought she was guilty, because he hated himself for doubting her. And sometimes guilt stole words more effectively than fear. His silence became the answer. Elara nodded slowly, as if something inside her finally died. Then she turned away and walked toward exile. Without looking back, Kaelen watched her disappear into the snowstorm. A part of him wanted to stop her, run after her, choose her, forget the throne, forget the kingdom, forget duty. But kings didn't get those choices. Kings sacrificed, again, and again, and again, until nothing remained. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Elara wandered beyond Ashenfang's borders. Alone, forgotten,
Broken.
at first survival consumed every thought.
Food.
Shelter, warmth, the basics. But grief never left. It traveled beside her, like a shadow, like a wound refusing to heal. Then one night, everything changed. Deep within ancient northern wilderness, Elara discovered ruins hidden beneath moonlit ice. Massive stone structures buried for centuries. Forgotten by history. Forgotten by kingdoms. But not forgotten by blood. The moment she stepped inside, silver light erupted around her. The ruins awakened. Ancient symbols blazed across frozen walls. Power surged through the air. And suddenly voices whispered from the darkness. Ancient voices. Royal voices. Calling her name. The blood inside her veins responded. Awakened. Remembered. For the first time in her life, Elara understood she was never weak. She was sleeping. And now she was beginning to wake. Back in Ashenfang, Kaelen sat alone inside his private chambers. The palace felt emptier every day. Colder every night. Fenrir barely ate. The wolf spent hours staring toward the northern horizon, waiting, hoping, refusing to forget. Much like his king, a knock interrupted the silence. The royal historian entered,
Pale. Shaken.
carrying documents. My king. Something about his expression immediately raised alarm. Kaelen stood. What happened? The old man swallowed.
Hard.
Then revealed a sealed ledger recovered from a dead noble. Evidence. Real evidence. The kind impossible to forge. Kaelen opened it. Read one page. Then another. Then another. His face slowly lost all color. Because every lie led back to one name. Every forged document. Every planted witness. Every accusation. Every betrayal. Lady Seraphine Valcrest. The room became deathly silent. Kaelen's hands trembled around the papers. Not with fear. With rage.
Pure. Terrifying.
Uncontrollable rage. Because at that moment he finally understood the truth. Elara had never betrayed him. He had betrayed her. And somewhere beyond the frozen wilderness, the only person who had ever trusted him was gone. The Alpha King's breathing turned dangerous. His eyes darkened. And for the first time in years, the monster Ashenfang feared began to awaken. 3 years later, the kingdom of Ashenfang no longer looked like the realm Elara remembered. Winter still ruled the mountains. Snow still buried rooftops. The black towers of the capital still pierced the clouds. But something had changed. Something rotten had spread beneath the surface. The people felt it. The soldiers whispered about it. Even the wolves avoided the roads at night. The kingdom was slowly dying. And its king was dying with it. Kaelen Draven stood alone atop the highest tower of Ashenfang Palace. The wind tore violently at his black cloak. Snow drifted across his shoulders. Below him stretched an empire he no longer recognized. 3 years. 3 endless years. 3 years since the day he watched Elara disappear into a snowstorm. 3 years since he made the worst decision of his life. The guilt never left. It simply changed shape. At first it felt like pain, then regret, then obsession. Now it felt like a wound carved directly into his soul. Every morning he woke with her name trapped inside his chest. Every night he dreamed of silver eyes. And every dawn he remembered she was gone. Because of him, behind him, heavy paws crossed frozen stone. Fenrir emerged from the shadows. Older, larger,
Scarred.
the great wolf walked to the edge of the tower and stared north. Always north, always searching, still waiting. Kaelen understood, because he was waiting too. The king lowered his head. For a moment, he looked less like a ruler, and more like a man who had lost everything. Again, far beyond Ashenfang's borders. Another ruler stood beneath a different sky. Moonlight bathed the northern wilderness in silver radiance. Ancient banners fluttered above towering stone walls. Thousands of warriors knelt. Wolves prowled between ranks of soldiers. And at the center of it all stood Elara. No longer the frightened Omega. No longer the abandoned exile. No longer the broken girl who crossed a burning bridge. The transformation was breathtaking. Silver armor reflected moonlight. Ancient symbols glowed softly across her cloak. Power moved around her like living mist. Not loud power. Not cruel power. The kind of power that made others lower their eyes without understanding why. A queen's presence. A ruler's soul. A legend awakening. The clans called her many names now. The Silver Queen. The Moon-Blooded Sovereign. The Wolf Mother. But none of those titles mattered. Because deep inside, part of Elara still remembered the lonely girl who wanted nothing more than to belong somewhere. The difference was simple. Now she belonged to herself. And nobody could take that away again. A warrior approached. One knee touched the ground. My queen. Elara turned. The title still felt strange after all these years. What is it? The southern kingdoms have requested alliance. The warrior hesitated. Then continued. Ashenfang has requested one as well. Silence followed. Dangerous silence. The mention of that kingdom still hurt. Not the way it once had. The wound had healed. But scars remembered. Kaelen's face flashed through her mind. Dark eyes. Unspoken apologies. The silence at the northern gate. The moment everything shattered. Her expression hardened. Send no answer. The warrior bowed immediately. As you command. Yet after he left, Elara remained motionless. Because despite everything, her heart still reacted to his name.
And she hated that.
Meanwhile, inside Ashenfang Palace, panic exploded through the royal council. A messenger stumbled into the chamber, breathless, terrified. The reports are confirmed. Nobles exchanged nervous looks. What reports? The messenger swallowed.
Hard.
The northern clans have united. Silence. A terrible silence. One noble laughed nervously. Impossible. Another shook his head. No one can unite those tribes. The messenger's face turned pale. They already have. Fear spread instantly, because everyone understood what that meant. For centuries the northern clans had remained divided. Unpredictable. Wild. Impossible to control. If someone united them, they became the strongest military force on the continent. Kaelen's gaze sharpened. Who leads them? The messenger hesitated, then spoke a single name. Elara Voss. The entire room froze. Several nobles nearly dropped their cups. Others visibly paled, because suddenly the forgotten Omega no longer sounded weak.
She sounded terrifying.
Far across the kingdom, rumors spread faster than wildfire. Stories became legends. Legends became fear. People whispered about the woman who defeated warlords without slaughter, the queen who commanded wolves, the ruler whose armies appeared beneath moonlight and vanished before dawn. Every story carried the same name. Elara. 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 The name echoed through taverns, through castles, through battlefields, until eventually, it reached the ears of Lady Seraphine. And for the first time in years, The manipulator felt genuine fear. Seraphine stood inside her private chambers. A crystal goblet shattered in her hand. Wine spilled across the floor like blood. Impossible. This wasn't supposed to happen. Exiles were supposed to disappear.
To die.
To become forgotten memories. Not return stronger. Not return powerful. Not return beloved. Every report made the situation worse. The clans worshipped Elara. The people admired her. Even foreign kingdoms respected her. And most dangerous of all, the truth about the exile was beginning to spread. Questions emerged. Investigations reopened. Old lies resurfaced. The foundations of Seraphine's carefully constructed empire were cracking. And cracks eventually became collapse. For the first time, she realized she might lose. The announcement arrived 1 week later. The Silver Queen was returning to Ashenfang. Officially.
Publicly.
Openly. The capital erupted. Thousands gathered near the gates. Merchants abandoned stalls. Soldiers crowded walls. Children climbed rooftops. Everyone wanted to see the woman who had become a legend. Snow fell gently from gray skies. The city waited. Then horns echoed across the valley.
Deep.
Powerful. Ancient. The gates opened. And she appeared, riding a white wolf larger than most horses. Silver armor gleaming beneath winter sunlight. Ancient banners flowing behind her. Hundreds of warriors followed. Yet somehow, every eye focused only on her. The crowd fell silent. Completely silent. Because this wasn't the Omega they remembered. This was something else. Something greater. Elara crossed beneath the gates.
Calm.
Confident. Untouchable. A queen entering a kingdom that once cast her out. And every person watching felt history shift. Inside the palace courtyard, Kaelen waited. The moment he had imagined for 3 years. The moment he had dreaded for 3 years. The moment he never truly believed would happen. Then he saw her. And everything else disappeared. The crowd. The snow. The palace.
Gone.
Only Elara remained. For several seconds, neither moved. Neither spoke. The distance between them felt unbearable. 3 years of pain. 3 years of longing. 3 years of regret. Standing between two people who once trusted each other completely. Kaelen's chest tightened painfully. Because she looked stronger. More beautiful. More powerful. And infinitely farther away. Elara studied him quietly. The king looked different too. The arrogance had vanished. The coldness had faded. The man before her carried exhaustion she didn't remember. Loneliness. Regret.
Loss.
The realization hurt more than she expected. Finally, Kaelen stepped forward. 1 step. Only one. His voice emerged rough. Almost unfamiliar. You're alive. Of all the things he could have said, those were the words that escaped. Because for years he had feared the opposite. Elara's silver eyes met his.
Steady.
Controlled. Dangerous. Did you expect otherwise? The answer struck harder than any accusation.
Kaelen deserved that.
Perhaps deserved worse. The silence stretched. Neither knew how to cross the distance. Because love still existed. That was the problem. Love survived.
Trust didn't.
Later that night, everything exploded. Evidence emerged. Witnesses confessed. Bribed nobles revealed secrets. One by one, Seraphine's conspiracies surfaced. The truth spread through the kingdom. And her allies began abandoning her. Panic consumed the palace. Control slipped through her fingers. The game she spent years manipulating was collapsing. Desperate people made desperate choices. And Seraphine was becoming very desperate. Near midnight, a royal scout burst into the war chamber. My king. Kaelen rose instantly. What happened? The scout's face was pale with horror. The eastern borders have fallen. Silence. Then dread.
Cold.
Heavy. Immediate. The scout continued. Enemy armies are advancing toward Ashenfang. The room erupted. Questions.
Shouting.
Chaos. But Kaelen heard only one thing. Enemy armies. Because he already knew what came next. Then the scout delivered the final blow. The invasion was arranged from inside the kingdom. Kaelen's eyes darkened. Seraphine. Of course. The woman had chosen treason over defeat. The woman had chosen war over surrender. Outside the palace windows, war horns began echoing through the night. And standing across the chamber from Kaelen, Elara slowly turned toward the sound, because both of them understood the truth. The battle for Ashenfang had finally begun, and before the war ended, everything they still cared about might be lost. The night before the battle felt wrong. Not quiet, not peaceful.
Wrong.
The kind of silence that existed before kingdoms died. Dark clouds smothered the sky above Ashenfang. Snow fell in slow spirals across the capital. Torches burned along the city walls. Thousands of soldiers stood ready, waiting, watching, praying, because beyond the mountains, war was coming, and everyone could feel it. Inside the war chamber, tension hung so heavily in the air it seemed difficult to breathe. Generals crowded around maps. Messengers raced through corridors. Reports arrived every minute, each one worse than the last. Eastern fortresses had fallen. Supply routes were destroyed. Entire villages burned. The enemy was advancing faster than expected. Seraphine had prepared this invasion for years. Every betrayal, every secret alliance, every stolen piece of information, all of it led to this moment, the destruction of Ashenfang, and the rise of a queen built from treachery. At the center of the chamber stood Kaelen Draven, no longer the cold ruler who hid behind duty, no longer the king who sacrificed love for politics. Tonight he looked like something else, a man with nothing left to lose. His dark eyes moved toward Elara. She stood across the room surrounded by northern commanders. Moonlight reflected from silver armor. Power seemed to radiate around her naturally, not because she demanded attention, because she no longer needed to. 3 years ago, she had entered this palace as an unwanted Omega. Tonight, she stood inside it as the strongest ally Ashenfang possessed. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. For a brief moment, their eyes met. The world seemed to disappear. No soldiers, no war, no history, only unfinished feelings, unspoken words, and the painful realization that despite everything, they still cared. Deeply, dangerously, completely. Then the war horn sounded, and reality returned. Dawn arrived wrapped in fire. Enemy banners covered the horizon. Thousands upon thousands of soldiers marched through the snow. An endless ocean of steel. The sight alone could break weaker kingdoms. Ashenfang's defenders stood atop the walls. Fear spread through the ranks, because, no matter how brave someone was, they were still human, and humans feared death. Kaelen stepped onto the battlements. The moment soldiers noticed him, silence spread. The Alpha King stared across the battlefield. Wind whipped through his black cloak. Snow danced around him. For the first time in years, he didn't speak as a ruler.
He spoke as a man.
Ashenfang has suffered. The words carried across the walls. Our people have suffered. The soldiers listened. Our mistakes brought us here. Silence followed. Honest silence. Then Kaelen's voice hardened. But today, his hand wrapped around his sword. We fight for each other. A roar exploded from the army. Steel struck shields. Battle cries echoed through the valley. Fear transformed into determination. And for the first time in years, hope returned to Ashenfang. The battle began like a storm. Arrows darkened the sky. Catapults shook the earth. Fire exploded against stone walls. The world became chaos. Steel clashed against steel. Horses screamed. Warriors fell. Snow turned crimson. Hours passed. The battlefield became a nightmare. Yet somehow Ashenfang endured. Because Elara was there. Everywhere. Leading charges. Saving soldiers. Turning defeat into victory. Ancient silver light flowed through her veins. Moon magic awakened beneath her skin. Wolves emerged from surrounding forests. Hundreds. Then thousands. Massive gray shadows racing through the snow. The sight terrified the enemy. Legends became reality. The Wolf Queen had arrived, and nature itself fought beside her. Far behind enemy lines, Seraphine watched everything unravel. Her beautiful face twisted with rage. This wasn't supposed to happen. She had calculated every possibility, planned every betrayal, controlled every outcome. Yet one person kept ruining everything. Elara. Always Elara. The Omega who refused to break. The woman who refused to disappear. Hatred consumed her completely. And hatred made people dangerous. But desperation made them deadly. By sunset, enemy forces began retreating. Victory seemed possible. Then disaster struck. A scream echoed across the battlefield. Soldiers turned. Horror spread instantly. Because Seraphine had vanished. And so had Elara. Deep inside an abandoned fortress overlooking the battlefield, moonlight poured through shattered windows. Cold wind howled through broken stone halls. And at the center of the ruins stood Seraphine. One hand wrapped around a dagger, the other gripping Elara's arm. Blood stained the floor. The smile on Seraphine's face looked insane. Broken. Dangerous. Finished. You took everything from me. Her voice trembled. Not from fear. From obsession. Elara remained calm, though exhaustion weighed heavily upon her.
No.
The answer was quiet. You destroyed yourself. Something snapped inside Seraphine. The dagger rose. Suddenly, a roar exploded through the ruins. Kaelen, the Alpha King, crashed through the doorway like a force of nature. His sword gleamed beneath moonlight. Murder burned in his eyes. The sight alone made soldiers retreat. But Seraphine only laughed. A terrible sound, because she had one final move. One final cruelty. One final choice. She placed the dagger against Elara's throat.
And smiled.
Choose. The word echoed through the ruined hall. Kaelen froze. Seraphine pointed toward the battlefield below. Enemy commanders were regrouping, preparing another assault. If you save her... She pressed the blade harder. Your army dies. Silence. Cold. Heavy. Impossible. The same choice. The same sacrifice. The same trap. 3 years ago, Kaelen chose duty. 3 years ago, he lost everything. This time was different. This time he understood. A kingdom built on sacrifice never stopped demanding sacrifices. And eventually there was nothing left. Kaelen lowered his sword. His gaze locked onto Elara's. Then he made his decision. The decision that changed everything. No. Seraphine blinked.
Confused.
Kaelen stepped forward. Slowly.
Deliberately.
No more.
His voice shook the room.
I will not sacrifice her. The word struck like lightning. Elara stared at him, shock flooding her expression. Because for the first time, he chose her. Not duty. Not politics. Not fear. Her. Always her. What happened next occurred in seconds. Seraphine lunged. The dagger flashed. Silver light exploded. Moon magic erupted from Elara's body. The ruins trembled violently. Ancient power surged through the hall. Walls cracked. Stone shattered. Wind screamed. And when the light faded, Seraphine lay defeated. Her empire of lies finally broken. Her war finally ended. The battle ended before sunrise. Enemy armies surrendered. Ashenfang survived. The kingdom was saved. But the greatest battle still remained. The one between two wounded hearts. Days later, the entire kingdom gathered within the capital. Thousands filled the streets. Thousands more crowded the palace grounds. Waiting. Watching. Listening. Because King Kaelen Draven had called a public assembly. The Alpha King stepped forward. No crown. No armor. No throne. Just a man. For the first time in his life. Silence spread across the crowd. Then Kaelen spoke. I failed. Shock moved through the kingdom. Kings didn't admit failure. Yet he continued. I failed someone who trusted me. His gaze found Elara. Standing nearby. Silver cloak flowing in the wind. I allowed fear and politics to decide what my heart already knew. The crowd remained silent. Listening. Watching. Witnessing history. Then Kaelen did something nobody expected. The feared Alpha King dropped to one knee. Before Elara. Gasps erupted everywhere. Because kings didn't kneel. Not for anyone. Yet here he was. The most powerful ruler in the continent. offering humility instead of authority, regret instead of pride, love instead of power.
His voice softened.
Not king to subject, man to woman. Can you forgive me? The question carried years of pain, years of guilt, years of longing. Elara stared at him, emotion tightening her chest. Because forgiveness wasn't easy. Trust wasn't easy. Love certainly wasn't easy. But healing required courage too. Slowly she stepped forward, then offered her hand. Kaelen looked up, disbelief filling his eyes. Tears threatened. The crowd held its breath. Elara smiled.
Softly.
Beautifully. And for the first time in years, peace touched her heart. I already did. The kingdom erupted. Cheers echoed through Ashenfang.
Bells rang.
People celebrated. Hope returned. Life returned. The darkness finally ended. That night, beneath a sky filled with silver stars, Kaelen and Elara stood together atop the palace walls. No crowns. No titles. No politics. Just two souls who survived their own destruction. Below them, the kingdom celebrated. Above them, moonlight painted the world silver. And somewhere beyond the walls, Fenrir lifted his head toward the heavens. The great wolf released a powerful howl, a victorious howl, a happy howl, a howl that echoed across mountains and forests alike. The sound carried far into the darkness, far beyond Ashenfang, far beyond known lands, until it reached something ancient, something sleeping, something waiting, deep beneath forgotten ruins. An ancient symbol suddenly began to glow. Silver light pulsed through the darkness. A prophecy awakened, and a voice whispered from the shadows. The Moon Queen has returned. The light brightened. The darkness stirred. And somewhere in the unknown, a new story had already begun.